The exchange between Steve Reed and Victoria Atkins in the Commons the other day reveals a stark clash over the impact of agricultural policy relief and the broader approach to supporting farmers by this present government, and indeed by the previous government. Victoria Atkins isn't somebody I greatly like, but Reed's assertions that farmers are in it for the money and his combative tone towards Atkins' tragic example of a farmer's suicide come across as tone-deaf and dismissive. In fact, I would say there is fault on both sides here. His reliance on general statistics about claimants not being affected fails to address the emotional gravity of the situation Atkins highlights, and Atkins' selective recounting of this story is in itself very unattractive. Atkins has used a tragic example quite effectively, frankly, to underscore the real-life consequences of a policy, highlighting the precarious mental health situation in farming communities. And her call for monthly suicide data underscores a need for transparency and urgency in addressing farmer welfare. But her approach, I think, should be criticised for potentially weaponising a personal tragedy to score political points, as Reed quite rightly accuses. But Reed's deflection into broader political attacks, blaming the Conservative trade deals and failures, distracted from the immediate issue at hand. And while the points he raises about previous governments may hold validity, they fail to counter the perception of insensitivity to the human cost of his policy. Let's have a look at the way this exchange
Secretary of
plays
State
out.
is more discomforted by being presented with the facts of the consequences of his policy than the reality of what this policy ensures. I can say, Mr. Speaker, I was a minister for 7.5 years. I've never, ever seen a policy have the consequences that this one has. But we know that there is a tragically, and they are now, members of the public will see the members opposite reacting in that way because I've dared to present the facts to them. We know that there is a tragically high suicide rate amongst the farming community. The NFU gave evidence about this. The Secretary of State has been told repeatedly. Will he collect data on a monthly basis of suicides from farmers, farming families, landowners and family businesses, so that we, the House and the outside community, can understand the human costs of this tax policy before it comes into force?
Mental health services are the responsibility of the National Health Service. And the former Health Secretary who broke the NHS is in no position to lecture anybody about public services. She was no friend of the health services, no friend of the mental health services, and she is no friend of farming. 12,000 farms went bust on their watch. They failed to get £300,000 out of the doors and into the pockets and bank accounts of farmers, and they signed a trade deal with Australia that undercut British farmers on environmental and welfare standards. I hear the posturing. It is this government that is standing up for farming.
I hope you agree that this exchange reflects poorly on both sides. Reed betrays a lack of empathy, and Atkins is vulture-like in appearing opportunistic in a deeply over a matter which is deeply sensitive. But the story she tells is quite clear. The farming community is distraught because of this inheritance tax, and the assurances given by the Treasury and by the Prime Minister are vacuous and unfounded, as is increasingly becoming clear as the literature is examined, as legal boffins get to grips with the details. And the exchange exemplifies the need for politicians to bridge policy discussions with deeper understanding of their human consequences, especially in an industry like farming, where livelihoods are often deeply personal and tied to the identity of a generation. And these knee-jerk policies, which are implemented within weeks, simply simply don't work in an industry which measures its activity in terms of years, if not decades. The same thing can be said about schooling. The broader message to farmers in the middle of this political back and forth is frankly disheartening and disconnected and shameful all round. And it's time the urban politicians in Westminster woke up to their responsibility to the rural heartlands of Britain.